Welcome to Open Secret. Today we are having a very special guest, a passionate advocate for children's rights who has dedicated a life to ensure that every child has a voice and the opportunity to thrive. Join me in welcoming Tush Wickramanayaka. What are your thoughts about the media sensationalization of child abuse victims? We saw in Kalutara that the media was quite involved in revealing intimate details about the victim. What must the government do and what must the media do about reporting such horrendous cases?
We actually do have laws, but the laws aren't implemented. So there is a law within the penal code as we speak right now, which is a very sound law that says, I forgot which section of the penal code it is, but any person believed to have been either murdered, sexually abused, or any other sexually related crimes, whether it's a man, woman, or a child, we must not mention their name, their age, or any other identifiable descriptions. For instance, they might mention the name of the school where the child lives, etc., where the child can be then identified or located, is disallowed. It is against the law and it is punishable by a prison sentence. Whilst there is a law like that, there have been many occasions where we have personally, as a child rights organization, have actually written to the National Child Protection Authority to say, look, this is happening, do something. And when it's on social media, if you remember last year, there was a child who was found dead, a young girl, and there was this very particular YouTube channel who actually went to the scene of the crime morning, noon and night, and they were giving on-site information. And it was a frenzy, and they were interviewing the poor mother, the neighbors, etc., etc. And we even wrote at that time to say, look, implement the law, do something. If you were to press charges against one YouTube channel, one media person, one newspaper, I think this would die down. So the fact is that we have a law which is not implemented, and we have very, very weak authorities. They're very strong for the wrong reasons in implementing ICCPR, which doesn't even exist in certain scenarios. If you laugh or joke, they might arrest you. But the people who need to be arrested, who are clearly violating the law, they don't seem to be wanting to arrest because of the power and the strength that they have, the backup of the politicians and the money that these institutions seem to have. So that's number one. Number two, we talked about the NCPA. Now, NCPA is a National Child Protection Authority, is a very powerful authority. I keep saying this over and over again, and I'm very sad in a way that the officers of NCPA don't seem to realize that they even have this sort of power. For instance, I'll just give you a simple example because I am aware that the chairperson of NCPA, maybe he has been misinformed, maybe he himself doesn't understand the act of the NCPA, Act number 50 of 1998 of Parliament, which is a very powerful act. So he may not understand that he has these powers because he has recently declared that NCPA can only do monitoring. They don't have the power because it's the police who has the power to apprehend and press charges, which is absolute false. In the NCPA Act, from number 33, section 33 onwards, which talks about the power of NCPA, it says that any person of NCPA can be appointed as a officer who then, even without a court order, if they feel that taking a court order is going to jeopardize the investigation, for instance, there might be a tip-off, right? So if they feel that that is going to jeopardize the investigation, they can enter any premises. They can apprehend anything. They can take computers away or any other material away, and they can even arrest any person. And they have been given special, such an authorized person is then given special powers under the Criminal Code Act to decipher their responsibilities as a peace officer, Okay, so that means that they have power more than the police, and they also can go to anywhere. They can enter anywhere without a uniform. In fact, there is a special police unit within NCPA. They can go anywhere without a police uniform. They can go in any vehicle without having to have a police vehicle, and that's only because they don't want the alleged perpetrators to run away or the children to be afraid, right? So they have so much power and they can do something. But they choose not to. So it's very simple. We keep going back and back to this. There is a law, implement the law. Why is the law not being implemented? It's because we have weak government authorities, we have weak government representatives, and we actually pay these people. We pay taxes for these people to protect us. Forget the politician. Okay, the politicians we know in this country are absolutely no worth. Okay, but then we have government servants, as we call it, but I like to call them servicemen and women, government service persons. They have a responsibility. They are accountable to doing their job right, for which we pay them, and they need to show us that these laws are implemented in the right way. So where do we start? We start with what we've got. We start with those who have the power. Those who have the authority must understand that. If NCPA chairperson or director or anyone else says, oh, we've only got monitoring powers, we're very sorry, but it's the responsibility of the police, then I propose right away today, mark my word, let's close that shop down. Let's just get the police, local police, to do what they're supposed to be doing even better then.
We spoke to a 5th grader from Jaffna. Her name is Vaishnavi. She was quite emotional, and she requested us not to reveal her entire name or get any footage, but she told us that she is quite reluctant to go to school, and it's all because she can't afford more uniforms. She has only 2 uniforms, and she has now resorted to skipping school, and she is quite scared to go to school because her friends are ridiculing her. What are your thoughts about social anxiety among school children due to the prevailing economic crisis?
I mean, there's been a lot of research already been done, and a lot of studies already been done by UNICEF and other UN agencies, which shows that our children are malnourished. Our children, the educational standards, the literacy rates are now going down. So these are hardcore facts. Now again, I talk about visionary leadership, and I'm coming back there. COVID was not just for Sri Lanka. COVID for the entire world. And all other governments, what did they do? They increased the budget for education and health. But what did we do? We increased the budget for defense. And we reduced both for education and health. We had meager amounts given for health and education, as opposed to what the other countries did. By increasing it, they not only were able to get better COVID preparations and out of the woods from COVID because of the very fast and rapid vaccination process, and also they were then able to manage the rest of the health crisis that happens often. By increasing the education, they were able to fund the online education and the other resources that were required. Nowhere in the world other than in Sri Lanka were exams, because of exams, children were not, for instance, we are insisting that exams must be held in Sri Lanka. So we've delayed our children's education by 6 months to a year now. Some children are now behind 1.5 years because we haven't been able to hold the O-levels and A-levels on time. But in all other European countries and the more advanced countries, they just forgot about O-levels and A-levels. They allowed the children to move up. They forgot about certain chapters and sections within the curriculum and made it less pressure for the children. So they had kind of the lateral thinking, this visionary thinking, this thinking that was fit for the 21st century. It wasn't just about finishing a curriculum, it was also about the mental health state of a child. So they allowed the child to go up a grade, they allowed the children to go into university even without A-levels. Okay, and that system can only work though if we have the basic education system sound, where a teacher has full attention to a student, where the teacher actually understands the student. But here we already have a very cumbersome curriculum. We have highly pressured and anxious teachers to begin with. They don't actually know what the children are doing. They will give them the homework, but they will run away because of their economic issues to do private tuition, etc., etc. So they don't really understand, nor have they identified their own students. So we actually have a whole kind of a mix-up, a pickle of things going wrong in Sri Lanka. And the only way that we could fix this is for our public representatives to take stock. It's not just about the economy, or the silly ICCPR and keep on arresting everyone else. We really need to understand that there are much higher priorities in Sri Lanka. Children, their education, health of the people, the lawlessness in Sri Lanka, the fact that the law and the system is breaking. So we might be economically strive one day, maybe in the future, in another year or two or whatever, we may be sound, but the moral fabric and everything else has broken down. What good is that going to be, right? So yes, I do believe that these children are compelled to stay at home because of extreme poverty. I do believe that parents are making very painful decisions to send one child on one day to school and another child on another day to school. So it's almost like a rationed basis that they're having their education. I do believe that up until now, we had the elderly population who were dependent on either samurdhi or dependent on a cement bag or something else. But now I believe that we have even made our children dependent for a book, a pen, and a pair of shoes. This is an appeal to all principals. There was a circular, I believe, that went out saying even if a child hasn't worn the right uniform, hasn't got the right pair of shoes, hasn't cut their hair, please allow them to come to school. So I'm going to reiterate this. Principals, you have the last say of how you manage discipline in your school. So be kind, be heartful, not heartless, be empathetic, not shameless, and allow any child to come as long as they want to learn. If they have a uniform, let it be torn, let it be dirty, it doesn't matter. If you allow that, then other teachers and children will understand that that is allowed. Okay. Number 2, please have a session in your schools where you explain this to every child. Generally, to say that we are going through difficult times. Children also don't understand, so they may have expectations like what they used to have. So if you were to explain to the children, look, these are difficult times, we've got to do with what we've got. So it doesn't matter if you don't have everything, if you don't have lovely school shoes or lovely school bags, please do come. It's what's here that is very important, and that you are prepared to feel what's up here. And if you give that message, even parents will feel that they are not in that ridiculed and shameful scenario. So that can be very easily resolved. Number 2, you were asking whether these teachers are very well trained or not. Well, actually Sri Lanka does have a problem with teacher training. Now there are 2 ways that teachers come in. One is through the Vidyapita, which is a tried and tested and guaranteed end of being a teacher on a 3-year program that they train as teachers. They have a very small section within that about child psychology, however. Then there is the other, which you have just now pointed out, where any university graduate or any graduate who does either 6 months or up to 1 year training as a teacher can be appointed as a teacher, or any other government service person can be appointed as a teacher with a little bit of training. That external method is very warped, because as you know, we already have the properly trained teachers who don't seem to have the right tools to understand the child psychology, and we then have these people who definitely don't have an understanding of child psychology, who don't even have the experience of being in a classroom. So their tolerance levels are also very low, and there may be also people who are under stress themselves mentally and therefore they take it out on the children. So a very simple answer is no. Our teachers require more training. There seems to be a very reluctance as well on some and most parts of the teachers to admit that they need training. In fact, there was a study done very comprehensively by NCPA in 2017 about the disciplinary methods used in schools, and they found that 80% of children, shockingly, were subjected to at least one episode of corporal punishment, hittings or any other forms of physical punishment within one school term. 50% to child physical abuse, 70% for mental abuse, and very surprisingly and very dishearteningly, 60% of teachers admitted that they punish children without realizing what else to do, and they're totally incapacitated. They do not understand how to manage a child, and they lack the training. So these are very glaring statistics, and in that, at the end, there were 18 recommendations made by the people who did this study, eminent child educators and experts such as Professor Harendra De Silva, who was the very first chairperson of NCPA, and other experts. But to this date, none of those recommendations have been implemented. So I'm sure your listeners and you would be very happy to know, Lahiru, that we have now made a proposal for happier and safer education, specifically called No Hit Zones. And it's not just about not hitting, but it's also about an education without the mental and physical pressures, where we do training for teachers on being having a stress-free mind, where they can teach better the laws and the regulations and the rights of a child, specifically on child psychology training, the ethics as a teacher, and the myths that we have in society. And then we also have a separate section for educating the children, parents, so that there is a triangular understanding and a sort of a contract that they have with us and the schools to say that they will support the children. I mean, otherwise they might say, here's our child, give him a couple of shots and teach him. That's what they do. Gahala hari hadanna. So we want the parents to support the teachers. No, that is not allowed, but there are other ways that we can discipline your child. And the last part of this project is the most amazing project, which is that we will offer the schools some form of improvement of their services, like maybe computer systems or a water tank or something like that to help them. But the children have to choose a project that they can support the community themselves. So thereby we are hoping that we could develop a global citizen who is actually responsible and useful to society, as opposed to having a dependent child.
Now we are going to deep waters. During the past few months, we have got to know a rise in child abuse cases stemming from religious establishments. Why is that, and do you think that it's a sudden rise, and what should the government do about it?
90% of children are being abused within our own homes by the people whom they love and trust. Let's get that straight. Okay, so first of all, we need to be aware what's happening to our children under our own eyes and under our own ears and under our own walls, within our own walls rather, under our roofs and within our own walls. So we need to be aware where these children are going, whom they're meeting, etc., etc. But for those who are under care, so the primary guardians of a child are the parents, and the ultimate guardians of a child is the state. The state means first the judiciary, and then the state authorities like the police and the National Child Protection Authority or anyone else that represents the government, and then the citizens, us, that's the state. So when these children are under the protection of the state, such as in temples or in other institutions, we don't see what's happening. Often we don't see. But now what has happened is that because we have been so successful in a way of giving our message that come out and complain, they are coming out. It may well be that we seem to be seeing an artificial increase. These things might have happened in the past, but it just didn't come out as such. And they are coming out, which is okay, which is good in a way, because we can then implement the law. So in terms of implementing the law, yes, we seem to be having a lethargy in that, where there seem to be a lack of transparency and a lack of ownership and accountability here. And as an organization, we have written to the Minister of Religious Affairs and Cultural Affairs, highlighting this particular problem of children being abused in religious institutions, and we have given him a 5-point proposal. Number 1 is to ensure that the perpetrators are taken to custody and the law is implemented without favor and without any involvement of politicians. Number 2, again, NCPA has the mandate to monitor religious institutions that's providing childcare, so they need to step up. Number 3 is we have requested for a special committee appointed to look at the whole history of abuse of children. There has to be a date, obviously, that they can start from to look into it. Number 4, we have also suggested that they talk with amongst the religious leaders for a specific age for ordination or giving to the religious institutions as such. And number 5 is to have an ongoing monitoring process where the welfare of a child under the age of 18 has to be under the state's responsibility, and therefore they must have a system where when a child is being given away from the parents, I mean, you know, if you were to adopt a child, you can't just say, well, hang on, I don't want to have this child here, take it. There is a system. They have to check whether the adoptive parents are of good sound mind and health, whether they're economically stable, whether they're, you know, whether they have a good home, whether it's safe, etc., etc. And that same process must happen with the religious institutions to see whether these people have any criminal records or any alleged incidents in the past, or whether they are mindfully correct to be looking after a child. And that process needs to happen in Sri Lanka as well. So we have suggested all of these things, but we're very disappointed that the minister still hasn't responded even to acknowledge our letter. Thank you so much for having me, and so we are now at the throes of hopefully abolishing corporal punishment unequivocally in Sri Lanka, because we were the only child rights organization that represented our children, 5.2 million, at the very recent UN Geneva sessions, and so we're hoping that the laws will be reformed. And there will be a bill coming up very shortly, and I have also been in the committee for child judicial reforms, and we're hoping that the child rights and judiciary bill will come very near in the future.